frustrated that with being an artist trying to grow on social media, I feel like I'm constantly just creating things that I know are going to look nice and not really necessarily pushing myself out of my comfort zone and being willing to do things that I know are not necessarily gonna look good or be postable in the end. But I know that I want to keep growing as an artist, and that for me to be able to discover new things that I like to do and let my style grow and let my skills grow, I have to be able to step outside of my comfort zone and try things that don't come naturally to me. So I had the idea to do a self-initiated art project this weekend. I wanted to do a series of self-portraits because self-portraits are something that I think are a really useful study. There's a lot that you can do with them, but it's something that I haven't really done before. And then as a way to kind of add to that and make it even more of a challenge, I decided to do a series of them in different mediums, so each one being a different medium that I either hadn't tried in a while or deliberately using it in a way that I normally don't use it. I actually ended up getting to try collaging for the first time. I was trying to think of what I could do for my final different medium for my last portrait, and I realized that that was something I've been wanting to try, so that was super cool. And spoiler alert, it's my favorite one of all the ones I did this weekend. And by the way, I ended up doing all 5 of my portraits in my Crescent Render sketchbook, which is one of my favorite sketchbooks ever. But without further ado, let's dive into it. The first medium I worked with was colored pencils, which is in general one of my go-tos. They're so like low effort compared to things like paint where you have to get out like water and paper towel and deal with cleaning up after. Colored pencils are just no nonsense, super easy. So maybe a bit surprisingly because it's one of my most used mediums, but unsurprisingly because it's the first self-portrait, I was not really happy with how this one turned out. Honestly, mostly because the facial features turned out super weird. The rest of it is okay, but the facial features are the part that your eye is drawn to, so that's the first thing I see when I look at it, and I'm not happy with how it looks. Not to like blame the tools rather than the artist or whatever, but I was having issues with my pencils. They kept breaking, and then I'd go to like the little pieces of the color would snap off, and then I'd sharpen them, and then I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but like it would be kind of concave at the top where it broke. So I would think I would have like a nice point to color with, but it would kind of like go all wonky, so I wasn't able to get like precision in drawing those features, and then I couldn't erase what I was doing, so I just had to keep working with it. And then on top of that, this whole project was quite a challenge in the sense that I was going for a lot more realistic of a drawing style than I normally work with. Obviously, it's not like realism, but it is a lot more realistic than what I usually draw. And one of the things that I was most disappointed with was I learned the hard way that through doing this piece that trying to draw teeth in a way that's not creepy is so hard. I like was trying to do it, and then I gave up on it because I was like, this is not like something that I'm interested in being able to draw. So I just like kind of drew around what I was already doing and drew lips, and then the lips ended up being like huge and weird. But so the eyes and lips ended up weird, but the rest of this piece I was pretty happy with. So again, acrylic gouache is one of my favorite mediums. I use it pretty frequently, although I do go through phases with it. Sometimes I use it a lot in a week and then I'll go months without using it. I just kind of am learning to embrace the natural ebb and flow of inspiration within certain mediums. But what I did want to challenge myself to do is use a color that I'm not as comfortable with, or one that I don't use as often. And this emerald green is one that I think is so beautiful. It's such a lovely color, but I have my favorites that I gravitate towards that are kind of in my comfort color palette, and this green does not match it. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity to lean into using the emerald green. I also really wanted to do a monochromatic color palette in this piece, so use only the emerald green and then use the extra black and white for lightening or darkening the hue of the emerald green, which was a really interesting challenge. Something that I did that definitely helped a lot with this was turning my reference photo into black and white, so it really helped me to be able to see the values of the shades more clearly rather than just focusing in on the different colors. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're going to try painting a reference in a monochromatic palette. The other thing I wanted to mention about this one and the inspiration for it was that I got the idea to do this from one of my favorite artists that I follow on Instagram, Sophie McPike. She had shared a reel recently where she did a self-portrait like this, where it's done in acrylic gouache and mostly with just one color. My takeaways from this one were that I was happy with the steps closer I took towards having the self-portrait actually look like me as compared to the first one, and also how accurate I felt like the colors were, given that doing something monochromatic like this was something I'd never done before. I think maybe next time I'll challenge myself to do it without the black and white photo, but I think either way it was super good practice. I started with a pencil sketch, even though I find it's hard to get rid of your pencil marks with Copic markers. But I think a big part of the reason why the colored pencil one didn't go the way I wanted it to was because I didn't do a pencil sketch for it. And it's really interesting, like, this whole project is an interesting psychological experiment on myself, because I went into it with the attitude of knowing that these pieces weren't necessarily gonna look good. It was just to go out of my comfort zone and try new things and embrace that discomfort. But I can feel myself and hear myself like needing to justify why things don't look good, which is really interesting, and I think comes back to the whole point of the whole project, which is to remind myself that growing as an artist is supposed to be uncomfortable. You're supposed to make stuff that looks bad. If you're not making stuff that looks bad, you're not growing. And I feel like this is true in any skill that you want to either learn from scratch or maybe improve at. And I think it's always been a difficult and uncomfortable thing being bad at something, but I think it's especially hard in this social media age where we log on to our apps and it seems like everyone around us is amazing at everything they do. But I personally am trying really hard to do things that prevent me from thinking that way and pull me out of those thought loops. And I'm also trying really hard to make my presence on social media be a really authentic one. I sure hope it comes across that way, but I do also know how hard that is. I look back at things that I posted a few months ago or even a year ago, and I can feel like the inauthenticity in it. And it's not that I was trying to be inauthentic, it's just so much harder to do it than it sounds. It's like when people say, just be yourself, but like, that is so much harder than it sounds because we're constantly being influenced by other things around us, and it makes it so hard to decide what is you and what is your influences. So anyways, I'm just about done my Copic portrait here, so I'm gonna wrap up my little tangent and I'll see you in the next one. Since it was my first time collaging, I was really kind of just winging it, but it turned out really good, I think. I did a general sketch of the shapes, and then I went through my papers and picked out what I wanted to use for each part. So I ended up with this cute heart print for the dress that I thought was kind of reminiscent of the red floral. So to get the shapes, I would just kind of hold the paper on top and pull it back to see what I had underneath, and then do like a rough trace, and just kind of embrace the fact that it wasn't going to line up exactly. And then I erased my pencil sketches once I had everything cut out. And one thing I had the idea to do that I really loved how it turned out was folding up the paper in certain spots to give it that creased look. I really like this, and it made me dream about doing some future pieces where I start by doing some like physical collage and then scan it and import it into Procreate and work on it in there. I've got some big ideas for things I could do with that. Which leads me to make my final point that I feel like this project really did do for me what I hoped it would do, which was to get me out of my comfort zone, try new things, and most of all, I got some ideas for things to do that I don't think I ever would have if I didn't take on this project. I am feeling very re-motivated and energized that I was able to get out of this what I hoped that I would, and that I have this kind of idea of a project to return to anytime I feel like I need to get my creative juices flowing again and get out of my regular routines and practices. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while I did this project. It was a blast, and I also had a lot of fun putting this video together. I would love to hear if you're gonna do a project like this. Leave me a comment or a message on social media. Yeah, I'm gonna leave you with the rest of this time lapse of me putting the collage together, so I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.